Police name suspects in those home invasions and rapes.
I would wish it to be so before the end of the year.
Is the country ready to take a chance on gambling? We'll soon find out.
Our ability to sustain this standard is under threat by a chronic fiscal deficit.
The changing economic game, the state finance minister on the answer to sustainability. The Bahamas Tonight starts now.
Covering the islands of the Bahamas, ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
Welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the National Report. I'm Kishla Adderley. This evening, before year's end, voters could go to the polls to finally decide whether or not to legitimize gambling for Bahamians, an underground industry which has openly flourished despite laws prohibiting Bahamians from gambling. A referendum on the issue is proposed in the Christie administration's campaign charter as a priority of the first 100 days. In this report, Altavi's Munnings tells us the Prime Minister realizes that there are arguments on either side.
Nassau Game, Island Luck, ASU Draw, and Woodfall.com. These are the popular web shops frequented by Bahamians nationwide on a daily basis. Reports indicate that millions of dollars are spent and won inside these establishments that sustains the lives of hundreds of employees. Page 169 of the Progressive Liberal Party's Charter for Governance clearly states that within the first 100 days of office, a referendum will be held to determine whether Bahamians desire to legalize lotteries.
We cannot have the system, the government of the Bahamas, where people are paying national insurance payments, making other institutional payments, and then otherwise pretending that this activity isn't lawful and doesn't exist. That cannot go any further.
All of the political parties basically scouted the idea to hold a lottery referendum. However, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance Perry Christie anticipates facing opposition on the issue from the religious community and other stakeholders. He indicated that if the public votes not to hold the national lottery, it may mean that web shops may logically have to close.
The Bahamians will make a decision on what they want. If they say we want it, they have it. If they say they don't want it, and by the majority vote, then it won't happen. And that means that it will remain against the law and will be rigidly enforced.
Some Bahamians are also of the view that legalized gambling may financially impede the family unit.
Our people obviously are free today to do whatever they're pleased to do. And the reality is they're doing it. And so to what extent, we'll find out. I don't know.
And then the question remains, how will a national lottery affect web shop owners? Mr. Christie maintains that Finance Ministry officials have already discussed the issue with them.
And they had to consult to determine the feasibility of this whole exercise, the extent to which revenue can be gained from the exercise. So a necessary function of the officials in the Ministry of Finance was to place themselves in a position to advise the government of the Bahamas.
Gambling is currently illegal for Bahamians and non-citizen residents of the Bahamas. Altavi's Munnings, ZNS News.
Public sector reform and renewed focus on fiscal management are critical at this juncture as the economy faces challenges. This from State Minister for Finance, the Honorable Michael Halkitis. Today, he laid out the state of affairs to a group of financial professionals. Mr. Halkitis says if the Bahamas is to continue being the envy of the region, sound fiscal practices must be the order of the day. Shanique Miller has that.
With the new fiscal year just days away, the government is leaving nothing to the imagination, painting a clear picture of where the country's fiscal affairs stand and the hard road ahead to pull the economy out of what's been described as a very delicate place. Certain things are a given, like the Bahamas' gross domestic product being higher than the rest of the Caribbean and the Bahamian dollar's parity with that of the United States. However, State Finance Minister Michael Halkitis says those standards are not as secure as they once were.
Our ability to sustain this standard is under threat by chronic fiscal deficits, which has resulted in increased borrowing and an elevated debt level, a situation which is clearly unsustainable. The nature of this threat is our making. Although the Great Recession exposed fissures in the foundations of the economy, We cannot claim that the recession was the sole cause of all of our current difficulties.
Here's why. In the last 5 years, the deficit averaged 3.1% of the GDP, or $250 million. Halkitis told the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants this was the result of not changing with the times. Today, the government collects about 18% of the country's GDP, or $1.56 billion. The government now spends about 24% of the country's GDP, or $2.2 billion, resulting in a deficit of 6.5%.
And in many ways, we have been reactive as opposed to proactive in addressing the economic and financial issues which we have faced over the years. When you consider that the economy of the Bahamas is projected to grow by 2.5% in real terms this year, it is quite apparent that our debt burden in real terms is increasing on a per capita basis.
So what happens now? Well, for one, the government finds itself severely limited in what it can or cannot do.
If it is not addressed, it is possible to foresee a situation when the government, because of its demand for credit, squeezes out the private sector. This would mean a reduction in the private sector investment necessary to start or expand businesses, further hampering investment and growth prospects in this economy. Limited investment and growth prospects would obviously mean limited job creation by the private sector, the engine of the Bahamian economy.
And the most important thing, creating much-needed jobs. But even as new avenues are being considered, Halkitis says introducing new taxes is not among the options.
Tax increases, if imposed without care, could slip the country back into a recession. The same thing could occur if there were dramatic cuts in expenditure.
The Christie administration has promised renewed focus on revenue administration, expenditure management, a comprehensive strategy to manage debt and associated expenses, and introduction of modern methods to purchase goods and services in the public sector. Shanique Miller, ZNS News.
Well, after speaking to that group, the Minister of State for Finance accompanied Prime Minister Perry Christie to a fiscal position seminar at the Sheraton Nassau Beach Resort. They were there to inform senior government officials about the state of the economy. This days before the 2012-2013 budget begins. Altavi's Munnings reports.
That we are currently in the midst of one of the most difficult and challenging economic and fiscal periods in the history of our nation.
It's a financial forecast that senior government officials probably expected to hear. The million-dollar debt figure climbing and expenditure succeeding revenue. Minister of Finance, Prime Minister Perry Christie, painted the gloomy picture Wednesday to senior government officials responsible for managing the country's affairs. In his passion to enhance the livelihood of every Bahamian during this present term, Prime Minister Christie contrasted the economy's effect on the poor. He believes that the public administration system doesn't allow senior civil servants to acknowledge the plight of the underprivileged.
But if I'm walking through streets in the Bahamas and I come across repeatedly cases of young women who are unemployed, who have children, and I ask, well, where are you going to get the meal from today? And they can't tell me. Much more damning when I come across young men who said they hadn't eaten that day, and one or two of them will say they're going to rob somebody that night.
But with the new government comes new policies, and the Progressive Liberal Party administration wants to set new policies, particularly in tourism, to combat unemployment and the high crime rate. Not only in our number one industry, though, Mr. Christie recognizes the opportunities in agriculture and marine resources, too.
We must make a real effort to maximize the impact of establishing linkages, because tourists eat. And to the extent that we're able to produce, and we have indications of what we can produce.
With more attention placed on revenue collection this new fiscal year, Prime Minister Christie announced that he has drafted a white paper recommended by Finance Ministry officials on taxation, particularly value-added tax.
The paradigm shift that brings about is so fundamental that we're going to need every one of you to understand it, to contribute to it, and if we move forward with it, to make it happen.
And then in a twist, Prime Minister Christie advised senior civil servants that he expects them to report any problems from cabinet ministers. It's all a part of his way to maintain effective governance.
I said to the Commissioner of Police, even on these matters, I said, listen, I'm the maker of policy, you're the interpreter for me. But the one thing I expect from you, if you think it's the wrong thing to do, you must tell me.
The new fiscal year starts July 1st. Altaviz Munnings, ZNS News.
Police have identified 2 suspects in connection with those home invasions and rapes in eastern and western New Providence. Today, Commissioner of Police Alison Greenslade updated the media on the new developments into those troubling cases. Our Janaea Noel Ferguson was there.
An all-points bulletin was issued on Tuesday by police for 2 men, 28-year-old Donovan Stirrup and 32-year-old Eunuch Euling, for questioning into several incidences of armed robbery, burglary and rape. Without divulging much information, Police Commissioner Alison Greenslade confirmed that 2 men are in their custody.
We're doing a lot of very, very good work in respect of the reports that we've received. Just overnight, we made an intervention. We have some people in custody, and we will see where that will lead us. But we're not groping in the dark.
While these incidences of rape have reportedly been occurring for months, Greenslade said they are seeking other persons of interest.
We have a number of prolific offenders whose modus operandi are well known to us, and we have targeted them. I'm not prepared to go any closer because I do not wish for them to elude us. But do I have faces? Yes. Do I have names? Yes. Do I have fingerprints? Yes. Am I looking? Yes. We are making progress.
Now, without downplaying the situation, Mr. Greenslade reassured the public that incidences of rape are down.
I have devoted significant resources to these investigations. I have directed that we break the mold and do some things a bit differently in terms of our speed of operations. I'm not going to downplay the reports that we've received. But overall, rape figures are down in the Bahamas. That is a fact. Overall, crime figures are down in the Bahamas. That is a fact. The only 2 categories of crime that are still in the plus category are murders and armed robberies.
The Commissioner of Police also responded to concerns that the police took too long to sound the alarm.
We are a professional organization. We are very well trained. We understand the business that we do, and we have to be allowed to do our work without interference. That is the way I would like to answer you. I can't have everyone telling us what we should and should not do. You have to also understand that on the other side of this discussion are innocent victims and their families whose identities must be protected, whose location must be protected, and who I do not wish, listen to me carefully, to be repeat victims as a result of negligence on my part or my organization in saying too much. If you are a victim of crime, as much as people will scream and say, you should have told everyone, I don't have the right to telegraph to a country the street that you live on.
Janaea Noel Ferguson, ZNS News.
Well, still to come in the Bahamas tonight, we'll tell you about the advice PAHO is giving on the proposed national health insurance plan. Stay tuned.